Just want to make a quick disclosure. We get into trouble if we say anything on behalf of the CCC, that's a Community Consultative Committee, because both Libby and myself are on the Boggabri and the Whitehaven or Maules Creek CCC things as community reps. So what we say today is what Libby and I say as community members. Nothing to do with the CCC. Okay, thank you. And yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Our topic is the proposed expansion of Maules Creek and Boggabri mines and the Laird Regional Biodiversity Strategy update and how they make a mockery of the biodiversity scheme. At the time of the Laird State Forest coal mining approvals, firstly in 2004 for Boggabri and 2012 for Maules Creek and the Boggabri expansion, neither the decision maker or the state planning or federal environment departments were certain that the Laird Forest Regional Biodiversity Strategy offsets and biodiversity corridor were assessed effectively in line with the offsets policy in a way that achieved the objectives of the EPBC Act. A lot of people have pointed this out today. From our perspective, there were lots of words that were said by politicians and the department, but the uncertainty that the community felt at the time about how poor the offsets were seems to have been well-founded. Nonetheless, all three of the mines in the Laird Forest, so that's Boggabri, Tarrawonga and Maules Creek, they must implement the Laird Forest Regional Biodiversity Strategy. So the question is, what is this strategy and what are they actually meant to be implementing? So the Laird Forest Strategy is required to provide a framework for the development, implementation and management of biodiversity offset programs resulting from future mining proposals and other significant land use changes in the region. So stage one is a scoping report, stage two is a strategy document to be developed according to the process set out in the approved scoping report, and stage three strategy review is to be completed by the end of December 2018. All right, it just says the person taking the action must implement the strategy as required under condition 41 of the government approvals. So right now we have the current mine approval, and that is until 2034. However, recently, in the last year, the Maules Creek mine has told the community that it is putting in a new state significant development to expand mining. They're calling it a continuation project, we're calling it a mine expansion. They've told people through the November 2024 CCC that the environmental impact statement is to be finalised and should be lodged with the department by March this year. So what's it going to be? It's a new pit, or it's an expansion, a massive expansion of the old pit. So that's the latest story that we understand. And coal mining is to continue operating beyond 2045. And we note that the mining licence approval is actually until 2053. But what has been put up in the scoping report is until 2045. So it is to continue mining coal to 14 million tonnes per annum. And there is also additionally to be a water transfer pipeline. It's to be constructed between the Maules Creek coal mine groundwater bore and approved Tarrawonga coal mine Vickery extension projects. As the map from the scoping report shows in slide 3, the Laird State Forest is depleting further from mining. This current application has mining up until 2045 beyond the extent of the forest and up to the southern side of Back Creek. The Maules Creek CCC have been told that there will be no more high wall dams to capture clean water runoff that would be transferred to Back Creek. How will this affect the ephemeral creek and all its riparian communities, losing much of its natural inflow when in the past Laird Forest facilitated natural rain runoff down to this riparian zone? Only time will tell when vegetation is impacted along Back Creek. Another feature of the mine that needs to be mentioned for the expansion is the size of the final void. The final void is going to be 430 hectares, which is massive. And we asked them about depth, and that's apparently not going to be disclosed just yet. All right, are we on the floor?
Yeah, there is.
Yep. So, having a look, the coal lease sits both sides of Back Creek and is available for future applications, possibly even a modification. So, in other words, we'll possibly mine straight through Back Creek. The mine has told the community in 2023 that it will run up out of coal unless it gets this new approval, and it will run out by 2030. The property names contained in the expansion are Warriordale, Wallandilly, Charlie and Ellerslie. And for those people that have been following the property and the offsets, you'll note that a lot of those properties that are going to be mined were actually offsets and have now been shifted out of that category. So what we're looking at here is the expansion of an expansion. Okay, so here's a mine, and this is the expansion. But what we're talking about here is a drilling program for an expansion beyond the expansion. Does that make sense? So,
Do you want me to point?
yeah.
This is A346 where all the properties are, the property names. But this little blue hatched area is their new state significant development at this stage. That's the part they want. Now that red line is not in their development application at the moment. They have to put in to have it, and they want to go to Back Creek. That's Back Creek running along there.
Yeah. So, and if you look at the map on the other side, that's the same piece of land, but the drilling is beyond the blue hatched area.
So it's actually this bit from here up, that corner bit relates to this piece here.
Yes.
So the new expansion sort of encapsulates that, but at this stage, this is not actually in their EIS that we know of, but we won't know until it comes out in March.
So we've got two things going on here. We've got state significant development, that's called a continuation project. There's also a drilling program that pushes beyond that state significant development. And the reason we raise this is because over time there have been numerous drilling programs in the area since 1984. And what they have found, quite depressingly, is that there's 615.8 million tonnes of coal there, which, to be honest, is very depressing to think about. What we need to say about that drilling program is that the drilling goes from 150 metres to 600 metres in depth. So it's really, really deep. It's not 300 metres, it's double.
So, can you hear me? This area here, new area, this is where the, 615 million tonnes in that area there.
Yeah.
All on private, well, it was private property, but now it's all mine owned by the land, by the...
It's actually offset land, current offset land. So you can see what's happening. There's that whole shift from offset to mining.
Sorry. Do you want to go past?
Yeah. So that's just to show you the exploration and drilling program on A346. So just to make the point from our perspective, in Maules Creek, from the outset it begged the belief that bulldozing habitat, water sources and old growth native trees and then blowing up the forest only to replace it with native bushland years later would protect cultural heritage, biodiversity hotspots and water, or that it would encourage native species to move in. Species that were used to an 8,000 plus hectare piece of tier 1 protected old growth forests at low altitude that was described as irreplaceable. What we did know at the time of the approval was that being precautionary was a good idea. In our mind, if in doubt, leave it out was a good way to go, but that wasn't the way the government or the proponent saw the project or our land.
Okay, so here we've got the two, is that better? Can you hear me? The two different comparisons of modification 8 and 10, and we're talking about Boggabri coal here. So Libby was doing sort of Whitehaven, I'm doing the Boggabri expansion. It's not considered, well, they're just saying it's an expansion, it's not state significant development. So the Boggabri proponents should have submitted these modifications 8 and 10 as one referral. Single small modifications are less likely to be rejected and have harsher conditions applied. Cumulative effects are not realised. The initial modification 8 would have most likely been referred to the Independent Planning Commission, but it was withdrawn, halved, and went under the rug and under the radar as a modification, then to be considered at a state level by the department. Less hoop jumping to have the project progressed, and it's already been approved. That's modification 8. Meanwhile, the proponents, Boggabri Coal, went about working on the second half of the same action, modification 10. The proponents are at the stage of preparing their modification report. And when combined, both these modifications will achieve the same initial outcome as the original modification 8, which was withdrawn, but without all the scrutiny and true impacts to the matters of national environmental significance or to the effects that groundwater drawdown will have on groundwater-dependent ecosystems such as stygofauna. Both the triggers for the threatened species and water under the EPBC Act would likely be engaged if these two modifications were combined as one referral, as in the original proposal of modification 8. But by splitting these actions into two modifications, Boggabri Coal has also decided to add an extra year to modification 10 to extend it a further 4 years until 2040 instead of the previous 6 years as in the withdrawn modification 8. So when the modification 8 and 10 are combined, there will be a further 58.1 million tonnes of coal extracted, and the disturbance area after an additional 85 hectares, Boggabri Coal's disturbance area will be approximately 2,132 hectares. So now this is just a stratigraphic column showing basically the coal seams right down to the bottom of the Laird and the Maules Creek formation. Now, Whitehaven Coal actually have approval to mine right down to the last seam, which is the, hang on, find it here in a minute. See, this is what happens when you go off course. Templemore seam's the last one. But Boggabri Coal, they were actually only ever able to go down to the Merriam. That's the Braymont seam there, the Templemore seam there. But originally, that's where Boggabri Coal could go to, and now they're going to go right down. So they've got a further 8 more coal seams in their continuation. Yeah, approximately 350 metres deep. The deepest part, I think, of the Templemore seam is something like 400 metres, but because the coal seams dip and they're not level, there's different areas. And in fact, I think Boggabri Coal said there's a small portion on the western side that they're actually not going to worry about. That's why they're pushing forward to go towards the biodiversity corridor, because the coal is probably easier to access, whereas if they went to the west, they'd have to go a lot deeper and right down to the bottom, and that maybe they wouldn't be able to get as much coal out. So they've decided to then go straight forward. They'll have to shift, they've got a big dam, they're going to shift that back further, which will take it a little bit more of the Laird forest that's still remaining within their working pit area or to the side of their pit area. So when modification 10 goes on approval, this is our chance to voice our concerns of both the water issues and the loss of the habitat for the threatened species. So, first of all, the Boggabri coal modification, it's been approved. It hasn't been, the modification 8's been approved. This is modification 10. It's a controlled action. So this is our threatened species again. So basically, the swift parrot, the region honeyeater, and the Corbyn's long-eared bat are considered to be, in that EPBC control action. But also the department says that there's a high potential for a significant impact to the koala as well. And other vulnerable species. So there's other species listed down at the bottom there that are pretty much likely to be affected. So here we are. This is the purple hatched area in the smaller right-hand corner is where that 85 extra modification approval area is what Boggabri are after. Now, it's actually in their approval area, but not their approved disturbance area. So, and the orange line actually indicates where they'd like to go deeper down. Now, because modification 8 has been already approved, they can go right down to the bottom C. And this is what they want to do with modification 10 as well. But they can't do that unless the EPBC they have that approval for modification 10. But if they get that approval, then they can also mine down deeper. So you can see the cross section underneath. That actually shows in the light grey is modification 8, sort of as is at the moment, but they've been approved so they can go deeper. You'll see it in the next slide. And where they want to go down with modification 10 is the purple area. Now, the orange line is the new modification 10. The yellow line is where they have approval to go to at this stage. And the green line is our wildlife corridor, or our biodiversity corridor. Now, up in the top corner, you can see there's the yellow line. There's two little areas either side that actually overlap the green corridor. Now, we've questioned Boggabri Coal many times and they've said, no, it's all right, we're not going to mine that part. Okay? Anyway, we'll see what they do. So, actually now, what I'm questioning is we were asked, or a member at our CCC meeting asked when they'd start rehab, if all this got going, and they kept going to 2040. And they said, oh, look, it'll be 5 or 10 years after 2040. But really, we can't wait until 2050 for rehabilitation to start, and then another 100 to 150 years on top of that for habitat hollows to form in mature trees. So this is just quickly, the top one's the same as the last slide, and the bottom one is where they want to mine down to, which is the Temple Moor seam. So huge dirty ground hole again, very close to the biodiversity corridor. There'll probably be edge effect. Well, we've already seen the blast. Now I think I'll do an update for Anna too. I probably haven't got round to telling her. The Boggabri Coal, they've issued an invitation on my request to actually go and have a look at the biodiversity corridor, which they keep downplaying and saying, oh, it's of low habitat and low quality and all the rest of it. Anyway, so at some stage in the future, hopefully after they've finished doing their clearing, because at the moment both mines have approval to clear from, the 15th of February till April 30th. And that's what they'll be doing, bulldozing whatever they need to bulldoze. I think Boggabri doing something for around only 10, they said this year, not very much. But and Maules Creek are doing about 32 clearing, but we never take much notice what Maules Creek says. Well, that's what their forward plan says. But anyway, you can write words on a page, it doesn't always pan out. So, okay. Yep.
Okay, so back to the strategy. So we've just kind of more or less said, okay, here's the expansions, and of course, as I mentioned, the planning for expansion beyond expansion. So where is the Laird Forest Regional Biodiversity Strategy up to? All right, so along with what a lot of people have been saying today, these things are very small actions hidden in large documents where you actually get to find information out. So not that anyone has told us this, but if you read the mandatory independent environmental audit dated September 2024, you'll find out that so strategy 1 being due in 2013, it wasn't finalised until 2015. Strategy 2, it was last updated in 2017. And strategy 3, that was due in December 2018, so it's more than 6 years overdue, has never actually appeared. However, the independent environmental audit found that within the scope of the audit, the lack of strategy and also the lack of update on the stage 2 strategy did not trigger a non-compliance. So therefore, the regional biodiversity strategy is compliant, because even though it doesn't exist, as stages go, it doesn't actually exist within the scope of the audit, it's not a problem. So no one is really looking at it, and no one is really asking about it except us.
This is how they actually make a mockery out of it. I know everybody else has sort of covered most of this. Everything you've probably said in the previous speakers actually applies to the Laird. But, yeah, no, we're not going to just do the headings. I know this man over here is a really nice man, and I said no. Sorry, you don't know me, everybody else does. No, so there's a couple of, points that I just want to make. And first of all, the offsets, they were never like for like, and we've heard that from Wendy and Phil, and that's definitely true. So what we've heard, that Maules Creek coal were never equivalent or better quality than the Laird Forest. And it took Maules Creek coal 9 years to have the audacity to seek a variation, there's that dirty word, variation, to the Minister Tony Burke's words, in the statement of reasons and the consent conditions of the project, and have them changed to suit their own means. Why did they do this? Because they couldn't find any offsets, and they wouldn't even come close to matching the Laird State Forest. So now this company presumes to know better than the Minister of the day and interpret his words as managed to achieve equivalent or better quality. This then allows them to deride the system and purchase substandard offsets and plant a few trees. So, and the next lot of dirty words is variations. Changing consent condition wording all the time. This is what they do when they want an out and they don't know how else to do it. They'll get a variation. But not only variations, they also have modifications. Especially to their consent conditions. Numerous modifications and variations.
Okay. So the second way that the expansions create a mockery of the biodiversity offset scheme are the continual extensions to secure offsets in perpetuity. And a lot of people have talked about that. Another tool in the toolkit of pushing things down the road. This condition also applies to the 500-metre joint biodiversity corridor between the two mines. We have recently discovered that this remaining strip of forest between the two mines may not be secured in perpetuity until 2053. A requirement date changed from consent conditions, obviously in a document that was hundreds of pages long and rubber stamped, leaving the corridor vulnerable to future mining. And that's really the point about the corridor. It is vulnerable to future mining.
Yep. And some of the reasons why the offsets were not secured in perpetuity was all the finger pointing from departments and the proponents. Every time we went to a CCC meeting, it was no, it's their fault, they're still getting things signed and whatever. I just will add one extra thing while slip it in here with the offsets. Boggabri Coal has told the CCC that they have now got to the stage of signing over 3 of their properties, their offset properties, and they're Mallee, Mile Plains and Merriendi to the National Parks estate. It's not signed yet, but it should be. And I said, beauty, when can I go and see the new national park? No, you won't be able to, you can't. I don't know whether that's going to be a permanent thing or only while the mines are still connected with them, don't know. But anyway, I'll be pushing that because if it's a national park, I want to go and see it. It's in my backyard. Okay, so the other thing that they do, other than variations, is modifications. So we've had none of these modifications are actually referred to the independent planning. So that there's just a continuation. I think Boggabri Coal has, they're up to, well, 10, well actually 11 modifications, and lost track of Maules Creek. So every time they want to do something different, they just put in another modification. So it's really a convenient mechanism that the proponents use whenever they change their minds. And as in the case of Boggabri Coal, easier to get approval than having to have these extensions referred to the Independent Planning Commission.
So, point 7, like in the planning system, the bilateral agreement between the state and the federal government, it enables only the state to do the independent assessment of any changes. So the big problem with having that bilateral agreement between the state and the federal government when it comes to the federal approval conditions is that the federal government does not get to do its own independent assessment of the environmental impacts of any project application. It relies on what the state government has assessed, so therefore there are no fresh eyes on reviewing any potential impacts on matters of national environmental significance.
So, in relation to modification 9 of Maules Creek coal offsets, and this has been spoken about a little bit before, especially in Wendy's, a community group has actually written 3 times since December 2023, and in Kirsty's as well, to the Federal Environment Minister for the statement of reasons for the EPBC approval of these dismal replacement properties. And the last time the community sought assistance was from the EDO, and I'd like to thank the EDO publicly for all that they do to help us. And we thought that might move things along, but to date only letters of confirmation that the Minister has received our letters. We're still waiting. So Maules Creek offset properties, modification 9, land use. This is what they say: the primary historical land use of Triangle, Long Gully, Narangi North, Kuno and Thornfield properties is grazing of natural and improved pastures with a small amount of cropping on the Triangle, Narangi North and Tenterfield properties. I knew I'd say Tenterfield, Thornfield. I told you that. And it doesn't sound, this really doesn't sound like critically endangered ecological communities for threatened species. What do you think? I would have to question these new Maules Creek coal offsets that are over 300 kilometres from the Laird and are certainly not equivalent or better quality if they have to be managed to achieve that standard. These offsets are too far from the state forest to save our threatened species, regardless if they can fly. An example is our vulnerable Corbin's bat that have their habitat hollows in trees that are in the Laird, not at Long Gully or any other distant offsets. Will they really survive? Local extinction. Nearly there.
Yeah. The Laird Forest Regional Biodiversity Strategy, Stage 3, is nowhere to be seen despite being due in December 2018. We know a community group has already submitted a formal complaint to the Compliance Department regarding the absence of the Stage 3 strategy that is now more than 6 years overdue. The community are just now again waiting for a reply. Extensions and new state significant developments. The issue here is it extends the rehabilitation time, which means tree hollows and mature habitat is nothing more than a dream for the future, while increased mining fleets to continue this expansion also means increased greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. So a final roundup of the strategy in the planning process. When these projects were first proposed and people came to Maules Creek, I was not present, but people have told me, very reliable sources, that they told a lot of lies when they came here. What we have found through doing this presentation and through our experiences is that this regional biodiversity strategy is a bit of a fig leaf. It's a bit of a little cover. It is clear now that these words on a page are to facilitate mining expansion and to transfer land into ownership of mining companies. It would have been better if the government had not handed its land management responsibilities to these two mining companies. It would have been better for our region. We gain little coexistence from documents full of loaded words constructed by proponents and governments and lawyers to unpick and find holes in. To the government, you have done us, the environment and people of New South Wales and your own industry of administrators, a great disservice. You have taken our trust in process while we have engaged in good faith.
It's disappointing that we didn't hear from Brendan because of our internet connection, but anyway, I've sort of replied a little bit to one of his questions. Is the new wave of nature monetisation saving or sacrificing threatened species and ecosystems? And I would say we do believe that our threatened species and ecosystems are absolutely being monetised and sacrificed by the proponents and the government, and it will continue in the landscape forest unless the system is changed.
So in closing, to the government from us, you need to change. You are failing the planet, the climate and our children's future. Thank you.